Would she have cheated if I didn't? Long story short, I neglected my STBXW and she cheated on me. Her exact words to justify it were her needs weren't met. She felt lost, lonely, not cared for, and felt like I didn't love her. She was looking for someone to show her a bit of attention and the dude did. Also said that she hates that it got physical, which I think is BS. Probably a dumb question to ask, but the way I'm seeing it is if she didn't do it now, she would have eventually done it because she did it and tried justifying it instead of filing for divorce or getting separated. Months prior, since we were already having issues, I brought up therapy and she would always turn it down. She in turn brought up separation a few weeks prior to D-Day so we can work on ourselves individually, and I said we should be able to work on ourselves without a separation. So again, would she have eventually cheated then if I didn't neglect her? I feel like her saying her needs were unmet was an easy way out. Story 2. I 30M need some advice regarding a relationship break with girlfriend 22F. My girlfriend 22F and I 30M split 1.5 weeks ago, without calling it a full-on breakup. We'd been dating for a year, and this was my first relationship. The split happened at the end of a longer conversation where she brought up a lot of issues she had with me, most of which were completely valid and fair. Reasons such as me assuming I'd fixed issues she raised without ever actually verbally following up on it with her feeling like she were trapped and not in control of her own time because she felt obligated to prioritize hanging out with me, etc. There were several more fair criticisms in a similar vein, but I'll spare you the details. Anyone has the right to get out of a relationship for any reason, so that's not really what I need perspective on. At the end of the conversation, we left off planning to still be friends and left the door open for discussing maybe getting back together after a few months if the relationship still seemed viable and desirable. In the aftermath, I've processed some feelings and thought more about the situation, and I've noticed that I'm just left feeling incredibly hurt and betrayed by things she did the last few days of our relationship, and I find that I possibly unfairly question her motives. I'll try to be as unbiased as I can when I lay out the details of what happened, to avoid making the whole thing too one-sided, but I'm only human. Also keep in mind that I'm only talking about the parts necessary to explain why I feel hurt and betrayed, and that there's a whole other side where I feel like she was completely right about issues that have existed in the relationship since the very beginning. From my perspective, our relationship was going great, I was happy, she told me she was happy and felt safe, loved and taken care of. Then one day she called me crying about how she was having a personal crisis. A customer at the hobby store she works at kindly bought some trading card game packs to a kid who couldn't afford them himself, and they started talking to each other about the TCG because it was a shared interest of theirs and she's always looking for more friends to play with. At the end of the conversation he bought some packs and offered them to her, but she said she couldn't accept those. Later she found out he'd left her the rare cards he got from those packs together with his Snapchat on a post-it note in the employee room. Then he showed up again at a later date, they talked some more, and he invited her to his mother's birthday party. So during the call she told me that same night she realized she'd developed a crush and an attraction to him, and she caught herself wondering how it would be to be single. Which she said started a personal crisis, because she said she loves me, that she doesn't actually want to be single, that she wants to be with me, that she's the happiest she's ever been and that other guys would have a really hard time living up to me as a boyfriend. Yet at the same time she just really wanted to go to that birthday party, because she was interested and hadn't felt these exciting emotions since she first started talking with me a year ago. She said she felt childish and selfish because she just really wanted to have it both ways. This really upset me and made me cry, and I told her that I really hated the situation and that it really hurt. I said that I don't blame her for getting a crush, as you don't really control that and it can happen even when you're in a happy relationship. But I said that hearing how she was actually torn about what to do hurt me, and that I really didn't want her to go to that birthday party. Then she talked about how she was scared of regretting that she never got to be wild and free while she was young, and talked about how she might feel trapped and end up with resentment if she can't go. Then she insisted that I choose whether she should go or not, and I had to choose fast because she had to hang up and go to work soon, and the party was right after she finished work. Scared that she would resent me and find me selfish and controlling if I said no, I said she should go and maintain boundaries while there. When she finished work we rode a little while she headed to the party. I said I was still very upset and needed comfort and love, so I wanted her to come visit me. She said she would come visit me the next day after a planned visit to her sister. She also said she would talk to me after she got home from the party. I stayed awake all night, and she never wrote to me. Around 5:30 a.m. she still hadn't contacted me or replied to any of my texts, so I called her and she didn't answer the phone. When I've called her while she's sleeping before, she's always woken up and picked up, so at this point I started getting worried that she was ignoring me or something had happened. I called another time 15 minutes later, then 4 more times over the next few hours, with no response. She eventually replied around midday saying she was so tired when she got home that she went right to bed. The way she wrote to me started being a lot more emotionally distant than usual from this point on. We barely communicated the rest of that day. She just told me she overslept and were late to her visit to her sister. Then at the end of the day she wrote to me telling me she didn't want to come visit me after all, that she felt weird and needed some time alone. So I respected her wishes. 1.5 days later she said she missed me and wanted to meet, and suggested 6 days from that day since she would only be able to stay for 1 day if she came to visit me. I told her I wasn't emotionally doing great, so I'd prefer to do it sooner and was fine with coming to visit her. She said we could meet the next day, and when I asked if she wasn't up for it today, she said she had plans to go play the TCG and needed to not feel like I was throwing myself at her, and that she wanted to feel like she was in control of her own time and was allowed to have alone time. So we agreed for me to take a train to meet her the next day. Then the next day she asked if I could take a later train, because she wanted some extra time to do dishes and send a package she's been delaying. So I took a later train. When I show up to the train station she tells me she'll be late, because she's escorting that dude's little brother to some ADHD training thing. She ends up being half an hour late. When she eventually showed up, I had a mental breakdown. I'd been sitting with a lot of pain, confusion and fear over the past few days, from the things that had happened and the emotional distance she started putting between us, and something snapped when I saw her. After I calmed down she asked for us to go to a cafe to talk, and that's where we had the conversation that led to the break. It was mostly a conversation about how she's been thinking and realized she's given up on a lot of things that are important to her, and that she's realized I have a lot of tiny drawbacks that doesn't meet her standards. Things that aren't necessarily a deal breaker on their own, but there's so many of them and it's so consistent that it just isn't good enough for a long-term relationship. So it was a few hours of her talking about the things she felt I did wrong and what she thought wasn't good enough about me. She also mentioned how she'd played the TCG at her job's playroom with that dude she met both yesterday and today until she escorted his little brother before meeting me. Sometimes she was really mean about it, like expressing how she didn't like that I hadn't tried the rough time she wanted to try by putting on a mocking voice saying, "Wah, I'm not comfortable with that, I don't want to be rough because I'm so scared I'll hurt you," and calling me a sissy crybaby about it. She also said she found my emotional breakdown repulsive, and that my 6 calls during that night she ghosted me were psychotic. For the most part she was fair, and I think her criticism of me were fair and valid. There were plenty of things there that I genuinely do need to work on, but there were a few things like that which I found unnecessarily mean-spirited. So eventually she asked what my ideal path forward was, and I said staying together and have me work on the issues I have. She said that made it feel like I wanted to own her, that I wasn't willing to let her go, and that if I love something I have to let it go. She also said she felt like I couldn't grow while we were still together, that she and the comfort of a relationship was holding me back. So I asked what her ideal path forward was, and she said taking a break so she can get some space to feel like her own person again. Then I said that if that's what she needs, then that's what we'll do. Afterwards we set some boundaries, talked about how it doesn't have to be permanent, she just needs time to feel independent again. We agreed that we're not closing the door on getting back together again, but won't talk about it or suggest it for at least 3 months. She also encouraged me to try being with other girls to get more experience, learn more about love, and such things. So to get to the bottom of it, my issue is that I just feel she did a lot of things that were just straight up not okay, and I'm starting to feel way less amicable about the whole situation. Given that she was so distressed about her desire to go to that birthday party, she seemingly knew that it's not okay to indulge and chase the exciting emotions of a new crush while in a relationship with someone else, so she really should have just known to not go to that birthday party. I don't feel like going to the party was an appropriate thing to do, even if I did say it was okay. I also don't really feel like my okay was valid, because I was not fit to make that decision. First off, because it never should have been up to me in the first place, and secondly because I was in a lot of emotional distress, affected by how she said she might feel trapped and resentful if she couldn't go, and not given nearly enough time to actually think about the decision. From my perspective she knew it was hurting me and that it was selfish, but she did it anyway. Then, despite knowing I was sitting alone in pain over the whole situation, she didn't even follow up on her promise to talk to me after the party. I do think my freakout was overly emotional and illogical, but I really don't feel like it's fair to call it psychotic. I called her 6 times, not 60, and I had a pretty damn valid reason to not be entirely emotionally stable. I don't think that excuses it, but I do think it's unfair and mean to call it psychotic. While it was really painful and hard for me, I don't begrudge her needing and asking for time alone, even though it meant breaking the promise to come visit me the day after the party. At the face of it, I don't really think it was necessarily bad to ask for another day alone before we meet up either, or ask to postpone the train because she wanted some extra time before we met. However, I honestly think it's completely ducked up that she spent some of that time hanging out even more with this dude. She literally postponed our meeting time and spent some of that extra time to go hang out even more with the dude that she had a crush on. Then she even missed our meeting time by half an hour to help out this guy's ducking little brother. Like, it just seems so wildly ducked up and inappropriate to do that. It just feels to me like if you get a crush while in a relationship, you should either disengage and let it pass, or end the relationship to pursue the crush. It just doesn't feel like it was okay for her to go hang out with him to indulge in the crush when she knew it was hurting me and was still in a relationship with me. I just don't feel like having a need to not feel trapped or controlled justifies doing that. And it feels even worse that she then literally postponed dealing with our new relationship problem so she could go do it even more. Then spent hours talking about everything I'm doing wrong, sometimes in really mean ways. She's had a hard and lonely childhood with entirely too little love from her parents. Also some terrible relationships, previous relationship. She even has PTSD and night terrors from the previous one. Because of that, she's cried to me several times about how she doesn't understand how people can be so selfish, and how she doesn't understand how people can hurt the people they're supposed to love. She's asked me several times not to abandon her. She's told me how I'm the first person to truly make her feel loved and cared for. So it just feels so incredibly hurtful and like a betrayal to think about these things she did towards the end of the relationship. Like, how could she of all people do that? I also feel like I'm getting increasingly skeptical about her motivations. Like, did she ask for a break just so she could fully indulge in that urge to be wild and free and duck around, then leave the door open for getting back together if she wants to later? I mean, I want to think better of her than that. She really doesn't feel like a person who could live with intentionally lying and breaking my trust so she can create a loophole where she gets to duck around and keep the relationship without technically having cheated. The whole suggestion where she said I should try being with other girls to get more experience at first also felt fair, because she suggested the same thing after our first meeting, but now it also kind of just feels like something she said to feel less guilty about how she's planning to duck around. I don't like feeling this way. It feels overly bitter and cynical. I have no evidence, and I don't want to resent her for something that could be completely invented by the broken parts of my mind. She forgave me for a time I hurt her pretty badly, so I want to forgive her for how she hurt me too, but I'm not sure how to process and move past the resentment and the feeling that she mistreated me and abandoned me the second someone charming came around and made a move on her. I don't want to cut her out of my life, because even if we just stay friends, I just really ducking enjoy her company. I don't want it to be polluted by these feelings and fester, but I don't know how to deal with it. So how do I navigate all of this? How do I process and heal from this? How do I avoid getting bitter and resentful? Should I even consider it an option to ever get back together, or is it too broken and hopeless? If I continue to consider getting back together an option, do I have to try to be with other girls for experience first? I just don't know what to do or how to deal with this. I really ducking miss her too. I keep crying whenever I think of all the little moments and special times had. I cry when I think of all the hopes and dreams and plans that went up in smoke. My heart aches when I remembered her quirks, the faces she made, her little dances, her whole entire being. I'm confused, heartbroken, and lost. Any advice is appreciated. Thanks to anyone who bothered reading all of this. Update: need second opinion on whether I was emotionally cheated on. My girlfriend left me 2 weeks ago, and I learned that she had time with someone after about 1.5 weeks. In a vacuum, that wouldn't be any kind of cheating, but in context I'm not so sure. Thing is, a few days before our relationship ended, she called me in distress about how she was crushing on this new guy that had flirted with her a few times at work, and how she really wanted to go hang out with him at a birthday party he invited her to. I cried and told her it made me feel terrible that she was so obsessed with chasing the feelings of that crush, and that I didn't want her to go. She ended up going. After that she felt weird and needed time to think, created physical and emotional distance between us. When she was ready to meet, she said she didn't want to meet same day because she needed to feel like I wasn't throwing myself at her, and that she was allowed to decide how she spent her own time. So we planned for the day after. Then she postponed our meeting time by a few hours the day after. Then she was 30 minutes late to the new postponed meeting time. Turns out she'd spent time that day and the day before hanging out more with that guy, playing card games at her workplace. And she was late because after playing cards she helped his little brother get to some ADHD training thing. When we met up we had a long conversation in which she told me about how she's realized there's too many things wrong with our relationship, and she needs out of it to feel independent and like she can do what she wants. Then she keeps hanging out with that guy, and 1.5 weeks later they have S-time. So the thing that FCKs me up about this is that them having S-time shows there is S-time-ul attraction between them. Which in my mind means she started fostering an attraction to a dude while still in a relationship with me, to the point of delaying seeing me so she could hang more with him and bond over helping his family. To the point that she would rather hang out with him despite it hurting me, than just let the attraction pass and move on. I just can't help but feel like this qualifies as textbook emotional cheating. I feel like I was made secondary, that she broke fundamental relationships boundaries. She's talked about how she felt trapped and suffocated, and needed to feel like she could do the things she wants to do, but I don't feel like that justifies it. I think the solution to those feelings is to either work on it with me, or break up. Not to go indulge in and build an attraction to someone else. What do you guys think? Is it reasonable and valid for me to feel like she emotionally cheated on me? Or am I being possessive and jealous? Redditors' reactions. Redditor 1, she monkey branched to a new guy. It hurts but you dodged a bullet and you learned something about people. Never take her back. Go no contact moving forward. Op answer, I really should, but it's so ducking hard. I don't trust myself to make the right decision here, because I'm a very late bloomer and this was my first relationship. I've spent so much of my life feeling unlovable and like I couldn't even possibly be in a relationship, so moving on from this is really ducking hard. It makes me feel like I was right all along, that a year of love, effort of support from me is worth so little that I can just be thrown aside like that. Despite how she's been in an abusive relationship and had narcissistic upbringing, despite how she said she just wanted to be loved, despite how she cried several times over how upsetting it was that people who were supposed to love her were selfish and hurt her. Despite all of that, she still did this, after I gave her love, affection and support for a year. I helped her through mental breakdowns, I spent hours helping her with university work to ease her stress. She would have flunked the whole degree if not for me. She said she felt protected and safe and loved and cared for. Yet it had less value to her than chasing the excitement of being a little attracted to a guy she just met, and it just makes me feel so worthless. Like nothing I do can ever be good enough, like all the love and support I have to give is so valueless that it can be trampled on and thrown aside by someone who really should have put immense value on those kinds of things. Yet I still just ducking miss her so much. Every night I dream about us still being happy and together, only to wake up to remember the reality. I'm just so deeply lost and hurt and angry and bitter and heartbroken. Sorry for the ramble. Redditor 2, emotional? I'm inclined to think it was already physical before she broke up with you. Op answer, I also feel that's a possibility, but I'm only basing my conclusion on the things I know for sure. Which is bad enough already. Redditor 3, she liked the attention from that guy, then disrespected you by going to the party with him, then cheated on you. Then spend more time with that guy while dragging you along for a few days. Finally, when she was sure that the other guy had same feelings for her, she dumped you. That's what happened. She'll probably try to crawl back, and if she does, don't take her back as she doesn't have any ounce of respect for you.